now want to traverse a very important topic, and it's the terrain of need. And it's a big one. So, the first thing to understand is that all of us went through a period with our birth and our parents of being completely, desperately, profoundly needy for food, love, attention, safety, everything around us. If we didn't get what we needed from someone on the outside at that time, we died. It's that simple. And in our physiology and in our emotion, there is a terrain. If you remember the tree analogy, the 1-month-old baby is always there at the core of the tree. There's just more and more layers. 50 layers, 60 layers, 100 layers outside of that core, but the core is always present. The new layers go around it. They don't erase that core moment. Now, what this means is that each of us has a place within us which we can access, in which we are profoundly, desperately needy. And this place is the core out of which we came. Now, a lot of our patterns, a lot of our beliefs, a lot of our strategies, a lot of our sense of safety comes from how we were treated when we were in that domain, the first 7 years. Now, remember, it's like a tree. And so that core is still there. It's still existing, feeling, and happening right now at the center of the tree. We've just got our senses are bringing us the data from the present, but our inner senses can still access that core. Now that core was shaped when we were 1 month old, 2 month old, 3 months old, when we were dropped, when we were pushed, when we were fed when it was too much, when we were over. So we have those memories of being completely overwhelmed and overstimulated and there's no way to stop it. Or of being left and seeking attention to feel reassurance and feeling completely alone and being so overwhelmed with that aloneness, it enters a traumatic state, a timeless state where the timer in the brain during trauma can shut down and make the state feel eternal. So we entered that state. And then our partner, see, one of the things that goes on when we fall in love is it's a little bit of a repeat on a microcosm of that birth coming into the world. So you may notice that when you first fantasize and fall in love, that if you're able and willing to safely access your inner state, and I say that because some people are so blocked, so wounded, so determined never to feel needy again, never, that what they're actually doing is saying, I am never going to talk to that part of me at the core of the tree. I'm never going to talk to that 0 to 7-year-old in their desperate state. I, perhaps like the parents and people around me, am going to turn away. When she's desperate and crying, I'm going to turn away, say, oh, that's just childhood, and I'm going to wait till she smiles and now, okay, now you're a human being. Now you're my little girl. And so I am not going to be needy. I am not going to go through that miserable ache of being completely desperate and being abandoned, not having people that know what they're doing, having people shout at me to not communicate the desperation that I'm feeling and being shocked. It's like, I'm trying to tell you how desperate that I'm feeling right now. And, I'm shaken or, moved around or stuff is stuck in my mouth. And, it's the adults trying to cope with their own emotions and getting things done and all of that. But I'm so determined not to feel that again. I'm going to block it. Who, me? I don't have any needs. I don't have any desperation. I don't have any baggage. I'm cool. So the thing to understand is that most of our adult lives in a free country, we don't have that many needs. I could, I haven't needed any money for decades. I haven't, I've taken care of myself, etc. So most of the rings of those trees in the adult places, I can just turn my attention there and I can say I have no needs. No needs, no vulnerability, big deal, etc. And I can feel that way. I can even say, it's just human, it's just sex, I don't need you. We're adults, we can be free, we can do whatever we want. I'm cool. You do what you want, I do what I want. We're both cool. We can do that by focusing our attention on maybe age 20 to 50 or whatever the age groups in which we had that level of security, of stability, of safety, etc. But it's important to know that our experience, our psychological experience of independence and casualness is coming from a very clear intention to focus on the parts of ourselves that naturally feel that way and avoid focusing on the parts of ourselves that are as much vulnerability and desperation as they ever were. So it's kind of like rooms in a house. In this room, things are casual. In this room, it's just whatever's curious and interesting. In this room, it's, what the joy. In this room, it's here. But in this room, there's fears. This room, there's adult fears. In this room, there are childhood terrors. In this room, there's shame. In this room, there's secret shame. In this room, there's this feeling like I'm not good enough and someone's going to find out my mistake. So we have these rooms. And when we get together with a partner, the question is, which rooms will we invite them in? Well, typically we won't invite someone into a room that we're not comfortable to go into ourselves. So, we've got a mansion with 100 rooms. Some of them are locked. Like, I'm not going in there. I'm not going to acknowledge they exist. And no one else is going to go in there. And I'm going to hide the key. Then there's other rooms where I know they exist, but I'm certainly not going to let you in there. And I don't really like them either. And there's other rooms that I like these parts, but they're secret. It's secret that I like them. And I'm not going to let you in because you may judge them. And so I'm going to block you out. So we have these different compartments. Now, when we invite a partner to get to know us, we often start with the sitting rooms. Like here's my cool furniture, and this is the stuff that's kind of cool. And if we're passionate about this compartmentalization, we may not feel any jealousy, any attachment, any terrible enthusiasm or spark. We're just cool. It's just interesting. Maybe sex is just sensation. Maybe hanging out. It's just cool. It's, you know, whatever. You want to join our group? Fine. I'm going to go do this. Fine. And this is very close to the American ideal. It's the masculine American ideal. And because it is what is most cool, both men and women compete to embody this independent, cool persona. I look good, I feel good, and I'm impressed with myself because I'm not bothered by this. You know, sure, my boyfriend likes to, you know, fuck big-titted women, and I'm good with that, and I like this, and I like that. And there's nothing wrong with these rooms. There's excitement, there's stimulation, there's kind of, I would say, a successful compartmentalization. But I've met a number of women in the US who, when we meet, they kind of try and assure me that they have no needy rooms. There's no needy rooms in this whole mansion. They are not needy, they're not jealous, they're not attached, they're just cool. And the thing to understand is that they're just cool in this room, in the room they choose to enter relationship in. It does not mean they are cool in their most desperate, needy places. And if they have hidden the key, hidden the memory, hidden the room, and told those parts, I never want to see you again, and just walled off a whole wing of the mansion and just don't go in that direction. And anytime, so here's something that, that happens. So when we've made this choice to wall off a part of who we are, it could be anything, our anger, our rage, etc., we just wall that off. We focus on the rooms where we can be the way we want to be. Now, this is great, and we have enormous versatility, but it's also limiting, and there's a couple of limitations. So one, we can't enter the full room. We can't enter all the rooms of our own house. Two, we can't do house cleaning in those rooms we refuse to acknowledge and enter. So if there is a screaming, needy baby in there that's as needy and screaming as it ever was, we can't tend to that baby when we're in the cool room. It's another wing of the house. We don't even hear it crying. It's just far away. Now, some of us want that. Some of us drink and do drugs to partition, like, I want to get out of that hell. And in some ways, the first freedom when we are overwhelmed with hell is to dissociate. To dissociate is to take half of who we are, disconnect from it, put it over here, and we just connect over here. And this part is liked and popular and all of that. But it's really important to know that everyone does have the full part. Now, I'm really interested in need. It's a really big arena of growth. And here's why. It's the seed. It's what everything came from. Now, the terrors we have, the sense of scarcity we have, all of the anxiety and paranoia and stuff, it begins in that needy area. It begins when we have desperate needs that are unacknowledged, unattuned to, unloved, and abandoned. So when that happens, when we're 6 months old, for a day, for a week, whenever it happens, when that happens, the brain seeks integrity and tries to make sense of this, and it comes up with things like, there's just not enough love in this world. that's why I'm not getting love. That's the only thing that makes sense. Or I'm not good enough to be loved. Otherwise, I would be. And so core beliefs and patterns come out of these initial experience in these rooms, in these core areas of need, desperation, panic, loneliness, hurt, in these core wounds at these most vulnerable areas. Now, if we want to heal those beliefs, and our brain is committed to being consistent, we've got to go back and love and care for those initial personas. We've got to adore them. We've got to love them. We've got to let them know a new reality in the present by going into those rooms now and flooding those realities, those rooms with light, with love, cleaning the dust off, bringing in the air and saying, hey, come into my world where there's love, there's understanding, etc., etc. Now, this is not cool. It's fun, it's joyful, it's excruciatingly painful when you first go into one of those rooms where you've left one of those babies just crying timelessly, for decades, and blanked them out with alcohol and drugs and this and that, and you go in. It's miserable when you go in. But when you clean off the dust, when you get to know that child and where they're locked, maybe they're frozen in time with a trauma, maybe they're frozen in a terror or a sense of overwhelm. You say, I'm here. I'm not going to leave you here anymore. You have the run of the house. And we invite these little ones to come forth and learn and grow. And children, they're so adaptable, so flexible. And see, this is the gift. When we invite our core out and protect him or her, and honor and celebrate him or her, and let her run through the house, she and he adapts and grows so rapidly like an infant. Those beliefs can lift off like, yes, there is enough love. There wasn't enough love for you at that time from those people. But there is enough love for you now. There's an abundance of love, and we can co-create love, and we can create more and more love. And I'm going to love you, and we're going to love each other in the different rooms. We're going to, bring that spark. Well, what we get is magic. And what we get is passion and enthusiasm. We also get the ability to be hurt again. We have the reality of our vulnerability, that these young ages are vulnerable, that they are still needy. They need that love, always. They need that love. And so when we enter this terrain, what we'll find is that some people, because we have mirror neurons, meaning if I'm loving and adoring my little one, and you're trying to be cool, it's confusing your mirror neurons. Your mirror neurons that help you empathically build rapport and understand me have to get to know the little kid in your secret room. Now, otherwise, I don't make sense, and I start to, you start to feel a little crazy. And so this is how, we introduce, and it's also how we can heal one another, because when I'm loving these parts of me, and you don't yet have an experience of those parts ever getting love, you have experience of the cool parts being accepted and the adult parts being validated. But you don't have that experience of these young parts being loved. When you enter my domain and I'm loving those parts, you have an experience of that. You may experience grief like all the years that your little young parts didn't get that. Your young parts may feel grief. They may feel jealous. But it's going to bring you into that domain. Now, what happens in this terrain is some people are going to leave because they're not ready to enter that part of their domain. So they're going to leave. And other people are going to feel uncomfortable and stay. It's going to be a little rocky road until they catch on to how to love and enter those rooms in their own and love those parts. Some people may reenact our wounds, like when we desperately needed our mother, she abandoned us every time when we desperately needed her because she couldn't handle it. And so we enter this desperately needy place, and someone comes into our life and they can't handle need and they abandon us. And it's this reliving of this painful trauma. Now, this is where the art of discerning around need comes in. Now, I have a rule of thumb. First of all, I don't want anyone who has no connection with their needy parts, because first of all, it's boring to be cold and cool and look good and all that and have no connection. There's very little spark. There's aliveness. It tends to be a little bit of a hedonistic boredom when we're not connected with our rich, imaginative young parts. So, I don't want that. 2, I don't want my young ones to be treated with that kind of sociopathic hedonism of, I don't feel you, I don't care about you, I don't recognize your need, and I'm not going to honor it. So what I've learned is that there's this, that for various reasons, when 2 people choose to enter their neediness to an equal and conscious degree and need one another to an equal degree, it's absolute heaven. You can do a deep reparenting and healing in that state. Heaven. It's just beautiful. When one person is needy and the other person is running away from their own need and another person's need, it's hell for the person who needs. And it's a little bit claustrophobic for the person who doesn't want to meet the need. So it's best to create some space. Same true reverse. Someone else is desperately needy and I'm not feeling safe enough to either need them or be needed, and it's hell for them, etc. And so it's really important to address these imbalances of need. When one person has chosen to enter their need more than another, address it. So a good rule of thumb is to look for people who are able and willing to meet you in your comfort zone around need, knowing that all the juice, all the magic is in those youngest parts, and that those youngest parts are vulnerable and are needy. Who's able to meet me at the level I'm able to go? So let's say I'm able to admit that I'm jealous, like I want a lot of attention, I want to be number one. There's parts of us in everyone that wants that. I want to be special, and I need to be special. There's parts in every one of us that wants to be special, to be the special one. Now there's parts in every one of us that don't need that don't even want that it's cool. But there are parts of us that do. So whether we're connected with that feeling is really saying whether we're connected to those parts. Now, they don't have to dominate or rule. They're some of the rooms, but they're some of the important rooms. And the really wonderful magic comes in those vulnerable rooms, loving that vulnerability, loving that need, honoring it, protecting it. So find people that can meet you where you're at, and where there's a nice balance, where you can meet them and you're willing to be needed, and you're willing to need, and they're willing to be needed, and you find that in a parity. So now you can also choose not to be in some of those rooms of neediness, with people that can't do that, and in some of those rooms where you both need with people who can. But the key things in summary is everyone has gone through a period of desperate need. Everyone can access those parts in the present. Many of us have walled those parts off, and they are static in the state they were walled off in. Desperation, inadequacy, scarcity. In that static state, they affect our present through our beliefs, our attitudes, our choices, our underlying emotions. When we numb off from all of that, we lose the ability to see the influence of those parts. It's like putting on a headphone and not hearing it, but those parts are still moving around us and pulling us in different ways. Healing those deep, needy parts is one of the most profound arenas of conscious relating and transcendence. And moving consciously, safely, delicately, and beautifully into that terrain with safe people is the most magical thing that there is. So this is the terrain, and a good little shortcut as you're kind of navigating this, and also to feel out who you're dealing with. If you find need is coming in, wonderful, welcome it. But also pause and perhaps say to your partner, I'd like to have a conversation with you about need. How do you feel about it? How do you feel about being needed? How do you feel about feeling needy? How needy do you feel right now? What part of you needs what? What do you need? Do you feel safe enough, and does it feel good if I meet some of those needs? Do you feel safe enough to talk about it? And just see where they're at. If they can't talk about it, if they're unconscious of their needs, if they're a bit dismissive, if the needy parts in you don't fully trust the way they answer that, you could say, well, if you want to be a little risky, a little daring, you could say something like this. Well, I'm feeling 30% needy right now. I know I could feel 80% needy if we went consciously into that terrain. And I can also see that some of the things that you do are going to evoke that for me. So I think what we should do is, if you're really committed to not going into that terrain, not being needed and not feeling my need, perhaps we should separate to respect the space of our differences. Or maybe you want to try meeting me in some of those areas because it's rich and exciting. What do you think? Well, if that conversation scares the person off, or if they say, oh, absolutely not, okay, you've got your answer. And you want to scale back your need or create more distance, because whenever there's an imbalance of need, it's often painful and lonely for the one who has more need than the other. And please remember, it's not that one person has more need than the other. It's just lonely to go into a part of the mansion where those needs exist while someone else keeps you in the living room. It's like you let someone into your intimate bedroom and they let you into the sitting room, the waiting room. And it's not a balance of vulnerability. You get the best flow, the best chemistry, the best growth when both people are taking a balanced risk, a balanced investment in vulnerability, in trust, in need, in commitment. So you want those to be in balance, consciously, not with people who don't want them, but with people who want them. Good luck, and I hope this supports you in traversing the very tricky, very beautiful terrain of need.